Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel where your likes, comments, and subs are always greatly appreciated. If you've followed my channel over the past couple years, you know that I like to use multi-track recorders for my DAW-less setup. When I was investigating a new piece of gear that would help me with my multi-track recording needs about 3 years ago, I was heavily looking into the Zoom L8 mixing board, which also is a hybrid multi-track recorder, but it just didn't quite fit my needs. So instead I opted to get the Zoom R20 multi-track recorder when it first came out, and it's served me fairly well in subsequent years. I also got the smaller, more compact Zoom R12 multi-track recorder, which has its benefits as well as its limitations. But in October of 2024, Zoom announced a new product, and that is their small, compact hybrid mixing board, the Zoom L6. So I just got this in. I thought for this video here, I would give you all a first impression. This is my true first impression where I'm going to unbox the L6, take a look at what's inside, go through a basic setup that I would have with some compact synthesizers, try to test out its recording capabilities, maybe its EQ, and leave you all with my thoughts and summaries as to how this might work for me and who might benefit from this type of device if you are looking for some sort of hybrid mixing board that would also do some multi-track recording for you. So I thought we'd get started and try to unbox this thing. Let's take a look at what's inside and test it out. All right. So inside the box here, we've got a USB-A to USB-C cable. Looks like we're going to get the kind of standard Zoom wall plug, two-prong plug with a USB-A type port on the back for power. It looks like there's some safety documentation in here, and that might be about it. I don't even know if there's like a quick start guide, but let's take a look at the mixing board itself. All right, the first thing that I notice is that it is incredibly small. So it looks small in the promotional videos. That's all I've really seen at this point in time from Zoom. And it is small. It feels small and it feels compact and dense. It has mostly a plastic shell, but it has really solid weight to it. So it's definitely compact. They've put a lot of electronics into a small space here. For comparison's sake, let's put it next to a Roland Ira unit. You can see it's almost the same size as a Roland Ira unit. Pretty close. For comparison's sake, if you're setting things up, you want to put a pocket operator, it's about the size of a pocket operator in terms of its sort of length here. And width is almost the width of a Roland Ira unit. So it's really compact. This will work well if you've got a crowded desk with several synthesizers set up around it. Just taking a quick pass at all of its features. There's nothing on the backside. Underneath, we can power this with, I believe, AA's. Yeah, 4 AA's will fit in there to power the device. I don't think you get a long run time, maybe a couple hours. But you have the feature. I thought maybe these things popped out. They don't. It is on a slant, but I think you can also modify this on the side to load it into a Euro rack and mount it into a Euro rack setup. Over here, we have a USB-C port for power, as well as a door for a micro SD card. The door stays attached to the L6 when you open it up. Over here on the top, you've got 6 tracks that you can work with, along with some of your transport controls and, sort of master effect knobs and master volume, monitor out, and sound pad volumes that you can manipulate in real time. All right, so let's put an SD card into this thing and fire it up. Okay, so I loaded a micro SD card in here. It's a 128 gigabyte card, and I've also attached a USB battery bank to the USB-C port in order to power the device. I've also tested it out with just plugging it in with the wall wart. It seems like it works really quickly. But what I want to do is format my SD card. There's instructions right here on the side of the device to format your SD card. Let's give it a shot. I guess you are supposed to hold down the record button while pressing and holding the power button. Looks like it cycles through. Yeah, and then the play button is flashing to execute the SD card formatting. I guess it looks like we're good to go. We've got power. I think I'm supposed to shut the power down really quick. When you first set up the L6, I believe that you have to set the date and the time, because if you're going to record anything to the SD card, you like to have an accurate date and time stamp on there. So I think there's a startup menu that you have to go through by pressing and holding the high and the frequency buttons up here while holding down the power button. Yeah, okay, so now we're in a setup menu. I think if we hit the high button, it'll allow us to set the date and time with audio prompts using the encoders down here.
Date, time.
Yeah, okay, so...
Year, 27, 26, 24, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. Day, 20, 28, 27, 26, 25, 24. Hour, 15, 14, 13. Minute, 12.
When you're done with the date and time setup, I think you just hit the play button.
Year, 20, 24. Month, 10. Day, 24. Hour, 13. Minute, 12.
Okay, if we hit the frequency button, we should
Battery type.
select the battery type.
Lithium, NiM8, alkaline.
Alkaline's fine, hit play.
Battery type, alkaline.
And then
Auto power off.
the mid button will allow you to set the auto power off feature.
On.
We'll leave it on.
Auto power off. On.
Which I think if you leave it on for like 10 hours, it'll automatically shut off. So we're done with that. I think we just hit the record button. Yeah, and so we're backed out. I believe we could just shut off the device again. All right, in this setup, I have my J6 running a stereo line out that I've then split into left and right mono cables. So this is a stereo breakout cable. On inputs number 5 and 6 for the L6, they are capable of taking mono inputs. So if you only use the L inputs, they should be a mono track for 5 and a mono track for 6. I'm going to test that out and see what it looks like. I've set my levels here, just really basic to kind of get things going. And what I want to test is the EQ. The EQ has a high, a mid, and a low settings that we should be able to adjust, but the mid is a sweepable mid. So if you hit the frequency button, I should be able to move where I've got the mid control to kind of boost it or cut those frequencies. And we'll see how this thing kind of works with the EQ as I'm playing the simple pattern from the J6. Let's give it a go. So you can see when I hit the high button, I can now change the high, cut, or boost for all 6 tracks. Let's bring it up to the center. Let's test out the low. Cut it. Bring it up to the middle. And then for the mid. Let's hit the frequency button. Sweep that a little higher. Go back to mid. So you could see that the sweepable mid does give you some more fine tuning of the sound that you're routing into the L6, which is pretty nice. If we go back to level, we also have pan, so we could try out the pan and see how that looks to send the signal back and forth. Additionally, there are some built-in effects here. So we've got hall, room, spring, reverbs, along with a delay and an echo that we should be able to apply from the individual channels. So we should be able to give that a go and see what it sounds like. Additionally, so those were the reverbs that I was testing out. You can play around with the effect return volume, and then you get the individual amount of send effect that you want to apply to each track or channel. They also have a delay and an echo on those, and I believe that when I select these, yeah, you can see that this tap button lights up, which allows you to tap in a tempo with it if you want to match somehow close to your tempo of whatever your pattern or your song is. All right, so the onboard effects, they work fairly well. They're nothing too fancy, but they do give you some extra options when you're routing different songs through this. So with all that, that seems pretty good. I will want to test out the scenes. So let's see what we could do here by maybe moving this back up to a hall reverb. I might change the panning effects now. Let's move these so that maybe it's panned all the way to the right. And with that, let's see if we can save a scene. So I think our scene should now be saved. And if I move the pan back here, yeah, you can see that the scene button, now that we changed something, it's actually flashing. And if I play that, I should be able to play it and then just hit the scene button, and hopefully it flips all the way back to the right on the panning. So it looks like you could pretty easily save 3 different scenes, A, B, and C here, simply by holding down the scene button for a couple seconds. It lights up, and now you can always go back to a mix that you might like, which allows you to have some freedom to play around some stuff, mix things up. If you don't like it, you can always go back to that original mix that sounded pretty good. Okay, for this test, I want to hook up multiple synthesizers. I've got 3 different pocket operators that are all synced up. I've got the main melody running into a stereo track with left and right here for track number 3. And then I've got drums and bass on my tracks 4 and 5. Those are running in mono. I want to set it up for a multi-track recording, and in order to do so, I think I just hit the record button, and then I'll hit play. We'll see what it looks like. All right, it should have recorded a multi-track recording for us, and I believe it'll play back the most recent song that you have recorded if you hit the play button. Okay, so that gives you an idea of how you could set things up and get a multi-track recording that you could then play back on the device. One thing to note is that after you record everything, I noticed that it is saved in a file folder. So every time you hit the record button, you get a new, essentially, project folder. And in that project folder, you're going to have every single track. So you're going to get all 6 tracks recorded as separate WAV files, even if you don't have anything plugged in to those tracks. You will also then get your master mix, which is a stereo track. So that's going to give you your 6 tracks along with that master mix every single time that you hit the record button to record a new project or a new song. I wanted to quickly touch on a few other features that the L6 has. When it comes to the inputs, you can see that you have 2 combo jacks here. If you have condenser mics that you're running through an XLR cable, you do have phantom power for those 2 inputs. Any of the tracks can be muted instantaneously by just hitting a mute button. If you are running, it looks like a stereo line in for left and right on tracks 3 and 4, you can hit the mono buttons for those tracks. And I believe that when you record, you'll get 2 individual mono files as opposed to just getting a stereo track for 3 and 4. Additionally, over on tracks 5 and 6, you can hit the USB buttons and you can run in sound, I believe, through the USB-C port here on the front of the device, and then use these to control the levels for the sound that's coming in for stereo tracks that could be on 5 and 6. Speaking of the USB port, you can also hook up a computer. There are drivers and some software for both Mac and PC, which allows you to control the L6 with a whole host of parameters. you get finally like deeper control over the projects, your songs, your recordings that you have, as well as a host of other features. There is this MIDI in and out jack right here for 3.5 millimeter MIDI in and out. And if you set things up with the app on the computer, you can control a host of parameters using MIDI channels. So if you've got some kind of MIDI controller, you can set up specific MIDI channels to control the various levels of EQ. So instead of going into the EQ menus, I think you can control all those things on a MIDI controller if you've got the appropriate setup with the appropriate knobs. But you do need to set that stuff up through the app that you can download for free on the Zoom website. Additionally, there's this sound pad control. This just controls the volume for the sound pad. I didn't have time to dive into this yet, but you can set up 4 pads for playing back certain sounds. Using the app, you can load the different sounds onto the sound pads. I believe you can play them as one-shots by just hitting them one time. It'll play whatever that sound is or the very short wave file that you're loading. Or I think if you hit it, you can also set it to loop and it'll just keep going again until you hit the button to turn it off. So overall, there's a pretty good feature set for the L6, but in order to access some of those more advanced features, you will need to run a USB-C cable to a computer and run that PC or Mac app. Now, there is one thing that I've immediately noticed about the L6, and this is coming from my experience of using the Zoom R20 multi-track recorder for almost 3 years now. And that's the input jacks on 1 and 2. These are combo jacks. They'll accept XLR cables or 1/4-inch cables. And if I plug in any XLR cables, it's fine. You get a nice, good, tight fit, and you can remove them easily with a normal amount of force. But if I plug in a 1/4-inch jack or a 1/4-inch plug into one of these jacks, it's a really tight fit. That's great that this is not going to go anywhere. I can guarantee you that. But in order to get this out, you really have to apply a lot of force. And that gets old really quick. And what I noticed immediately is this is the R20. These are the exact same jacks, it seems like, that they're using on the Zoom R20 multi-track recorder for those combo inputs here on the L6. And I'm just not a fan of these combo jacks because putting in a 1/4-inch plug, while it's really tight fit, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be incredibly secure. It's just a pain to try to remove that thing in and out if you are switching between XLR cables or 1/4-inch cables back and forth, depending on what your needs are. So I spent $299 US of my own money to purchase this device, and my overall first impression is mostly positive for the LiveTrak L6. I really like the compact package. It feels very durable, even though it does have kind of a lot of plastic parts and components to it, but it still feels pretty rugged. It's got a good weight to it. I really like the encoders down here. They have a very good feel to them. Even though they are plastic, they have a ridged coating to them. You get a really good grip on them, and there's a smooth sliding action to them that is satisfying to kind of turn. And you feel like you can dial in exactly what you want with these things. There's no guesswork here, and it's not going to be flimsy. If you are playing a live show with something like this and you need to work these small rotary encoders, I think you could still do that on the fly and feel confident about how you're dialing in your sounds. I think you still get, I think the EQ is good, and you get a lot of functionality here using the encoders, working your way through the EQ. It's mostly immediate by hitting these buttons and working things fairly quickly across your tracks. I think that that's great. I'm sure the sound pads will work pretty well, and I do like that you get pretty good multi-track recordings with this device simply by hitting the record button, and you can get something onto the SD card that you could then take over to your computer and edit and refine later. I think the array of inputs is really good with the 1/4-inch jacks. A lot of versatility primarily for synthesizer players, but it'll work well in a host of situations, and at least you still have the 2 combo jacks that if you have XLR mics, you can still use this device. The onboard effects are okay, nothing fantastic, but they do work. It's interesting that this has that 32-bit float recording, so that 32-bit dynamic range is really large. It's kind of weird for me because I'm so used to always having to set a gain for every single channel. So you got the input and you run that input sound to the track. You always have to adjust the gain. Here with that 32-bit recording, since the dynamic range is so huge, you don't have to set a gain. It will always capture it. Now the tracks for 3, 4, 5, and 6, they only have one analog to digital converter, whereas tracks 1 and 2, there are 2 analog to digital converters in here. There's a low gain and a high gain. If you are hooking up microphones and you're using this mostly like out in the field, and with your microphones you're trying to capture people whispering, and at the exact same time you've got a really loud garbage truck that might go by, you could still capture all of those sounds without clipping because of the analog to digital converters. There's that low gain one and the high gain one, and depending on what the input sound is like, it'll switch, I think, in real time between the low gain one and the high gain one. So this way you could use the high gain if it needs to amplify the sound, capturing people whispering to each other. And then you've got a really loud airplane that flies overhead. It'll use the low gain to adjust that in real time. I think that that's really cool, but that only exists on tracks 1 and 2. In terms of things that I don't like, I already mentioned specifically these combo jacks when you're using 1/4-inch plugs. Don't love that. And there's a trade-off. If you've got something that's this small and compact, they obviously tried to put a lot of electronics in here, but they did not include any screen whatsoever. In order to truly manage projects, if you want to use this as a recorder, I think you have to hook up a computer to the USB port to kind of manage everything. And if you want to take advantage of those MIDI settings that you can use a MIDI controller to change up all these parameters, you're still going to have to work your way through that PC or Mac app. I don't think that works right now, at least today, on a like an iPhone or an iPad. They do have some iPad apps and some iPhone apps for other devices, but I don't think they have anything for the L6 right now. If they had that for a phone or an iPad, that would at least be a little bit better and not as cumbersome as having a whole computer hooked up next to it to operate all of those extra parameters. And I think not having the screen on here limits its ability as a recorder. For something that could just capture something quick and dirty and easy, this is perfectly fine. But if you truly want to build songs, you're going to struggle using this device right here because it does not have the screen to manage your project. You have no way to really work your way through the tracks and do anything with the tracks. You're going to need a multi-track recorder, I think, for that, or at least something like an L8 or an L12 that has a screen. It has a timestamp on there so you know how long you've been recording. You don't have any kind of visual feedback like that when it comes to recording on a device of this nature. And with the MIDI that you've got for those parameters that are in and out, the only bummer here is that right now you don't have any way to really synchronize external equipment. You cannot use this as a master sync with the MIDI out. It'll accept MIDI in with tempo changes, but that really only alters the tempo for the delay and echo parameters. So instead of doing the tap function to set in the tempo, it just modifies the delay time and the rate for the delay and the echo with a MIDI clock coming in. Sending a MIDI clock out is not going to synchronize several sequencers that you may have in a row. When I was using the pocket operators, I had to have the pocket operators synced completely separate and independent of the L6. I was only routing the sound into the L6. So it would be nice if you could use this somehow as a master synchronization device, but I don't know if that's going to happen in a firmware update or not. Until that happens, that's still going to limit your ability to record with multiple synthesizers in a way that you can always keep things perfectly aligned if you want to try to build songs. So who should consider this device and who should maybe avoid this device and look someplace else? Well, if you are part of a band and you have multiple people that play in the band and you are using a lot of mics, I don't think that this is going to work for you because you can really only run 2 mics in here with the XLR inputs. That's going to be a limitation really quick if you're in a larger band that has, a vocalist and you've got some backup vocalists and you're trying to mic up some acoustic drums. that's not going to work for you. If you are a singer-songwriter, you could absolutely get by probably with just having the two XLR potential inputs here, hooking up, a microphone will work. What will not work though is that you can't plug a guitar straight into here. There is no high Z input. You have to run a guitar into a preamp first, or at least into an effect pedal before you would run it in here. Otherwise, you're just not going to get a good quality sound using a guitar with passive pickup. So for just the guitarist, I think you want to look for something else that has a high Z input. But if you're an individual musician and you've got several synthesizers and everything's kind of on your desk, this could be a really good device for you because it is so compact. If you're hooking everything up and you just want to route it up into a centralized hub where you can have some recordings done very easily by hitting the record button, you're just going to grab tracks off of the SD card and you're going to do all of your song editing on a computer. So you're really just grabbing maybe 4 bars at a time, or you're grabbing things that will turn into a verse or a chorus that you can discreetly trim up on a digital audio workstation on your computer later, and you're not going to try to do any of that here. This could be a really good device for you. But if you're trying to do a lot of recording and song building track by track, layer by layer, you're going to have a hard time if you only rely on this and you're not really using a computer workstation for most of your song building and track building. Additionally, I'm guessing there are several people out there that are considering using this type of mixing board as a podcasting centralized hub for themselves. And that could work only if you are podcasting kind of by yourself or maybe with one other person, because it is limited. Again, you're going to have a hard time running microphones in there with only having 2 XLR inputs. The other limitation that's not awesome is that there's just one headphone output. So you don't have multiple headphone outputs that you'll see on other mixing boards like the L8 or the L12 or the Tascam Model 12. If you've got multiple people that you're talking to on your podcast, it would be great if they each have a mic and if they each have their own headphones that maybe have their own headphone mix with their own volume control that's individualized for those people. And you'll see those features on the L8 and the L12 that are not present here because you only got that one monitor out. You've got a master out that you could send to speakers, and you've got an auxiliary send that you could send out and try to run it through maybe external effects and come back into the board. That's great, but with only one headphone jack for podcasters, this is only going to work well if you're a one-man show most of the time and you're not reliant on giving somebody else headphones. If you're on headphone splitter off of this, that's fine too. But I think at that point in time, if you're running a podcast and you want to record everything directly onto the mixing board itself and not use it as an interface to a computer, you'd probably be better served at least looking at the L8 with its screen and its multiple headphone jacks. The last thing that I'll say is that Zoom and Tascam, they run legitimate sales, it seems like, a couple different times a year. And they'll stagger what products are on sale. This just came out. It's $299 US. I don't expect it to go on sale for many months. It seems like Zoom doesn't put any of their new products on sale for at least 6 months, if not more like 9 to 12 months later. But by comparison, the L8 is at least 4 or 5 years old now, but I have seen the L8 on sale for $299 US. So if you are patient and you could wait for a sale and you're on the fence, do I want the L6 because I want something that's really compact, or do I want the L8 that has all kinds of combo jacks that's a little bit more future-proof if I'm using microphones and it has more headphone outs with a screen on it, but it doesn't have USB-C for nice connectivity and power bank usage? You may want to consider the L8 because you might be able to get it on sale for maybe the exact same price as this unit here. So that's all I wanted to cover in this first impression video of the Zoom LiveTrak L6. If you've got any kind of questions, please leave them in the comments section below, or if you have suggestions for tutorials and things that you'd like to see with the L6 as I start to use it a little bit more, I will hopefully post some more content as I discover some of the new features and how to work with the unit. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. All right, goodbye.